You're listening to the Best Company Show, Southern California's business podcast, focusing on topics of interest to CEOs and managers of middle market companies, with your host, Robert J. Curtis.
And welcome to this edition of the Best Companies Radio Show and Podcast. I am your host, Robert J. Curtis. Glad to be here. This is podcast episode number 5, and we have a great show for you today. I'm excited to have special guest Lauren Feehrer of LoyaltyCraft with me today. And LoyaltyCraft is very unique among customer experience providers. She provides basically solutions and technology and management consulting and coaching and things like that. Mm-hmm. But one thing that's special about LoyaltyCraft is they start with the foundations of customer experience. And the foundations of customer experience, from not only Lauren's perspective, but also my perspective, is employee experience. That's something that transfers through, and it's something very important. And so let's talk about that. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. The employee engagement experience, but also the methodology that Lauren uses is very unique and special. She's applied Agile methodology, which is something that's typically applied in the software field. And she uses it in management and a lot of other areas. And we'll talk about some of the very interesting applications she's found for her Agile methodology. So,
sure.
Lauren, founder and owner of LoyaltyCraft, let's take it away and start. You glad to be here?
I am certainly glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me today, Robert. Appreciate it.
Wonderful. Okay, so let's dig in.
Sure.
First, tell me about what you do at LoyaltyCraft. Who are your clients and what do you do for them?
Sure. Well, at LoyaltyCraft, our mission is to really help companies create products and services that matter. And, it used to be that, people would say customer experience is the next corporate battleground. I truly believe it is here. Time is now. And so for companies that believe they need a great customer experience, they want to be the best at customer experience, what LoyaltyCraft does is help them provide tools and techniques to really get there. So we start with customer experience strategy, but then we also focus on things like how do you design that experience? And so we do workshops where we elaborate on the customer persona, really getting at not just the demographics of a customer, but things like what are their goals, what are their pain points, what's a day in the life for them look like, what technology do they use, what brands do they prefer, really understanding them and their journey with the brand, and so finding those moments that matter. And then the other work that we do is really around the voice of the customer. So how do you gather feedback? How do you survey your customers? How do you have panels involved to give you feedback on your product or your service? And that type of thing. The kind of clients that we have at LoyaltyCraft range from startups who are building new technology to large companies in healthcare, finance, and retail.
Okay, wonderful. That was my next question. You already answered it for me. So it's mostly B2C orientation, mostly consumer-facing
somewhat. And
companies. We
really love doing work in B2B2C. I think that's really interesting.
Okay,
it's a more complicated relationship too. So
what do you mean by B2B2C?
Looking at a client that for us would then provide service to an end customer. So especially in healthcare, looking at the patient experience. And so if you're a pharmaceutical company, how do you help enable the veterinarian or a doctor to then provide service to his or her patients.
Oh, okay. So that's B2B2C.
Yes.
Then. Okay, great. So tell me that I mentioned at the intro into the show that you apply Agile methodology.
I do. Can
you give us a very brief primer on what Agile methodology is and how you use it?
Sure. I'll give you the 10,000-foot view. And Agile has been something that I've used in software development. I actually started consulting back about 18 years ago, doing technology consulting with Accenture, and then I spent 10 years at a smaller firm. And I was building software kind of back in the olden days. They say it was more waterfall, where the executive would say, okay, go build me this. And you'd create these long requirements documents and then hand them to a technology team who would take 6 months or more to build it. And then, you turn it back around and it wasn't at all what the customer actually wanted or needed. And so Agile really flipped that on its head. And in 2001, a group got together, created the Agile Manifesto, which is really a highlight of saying, we can do this a better way. We can do this instead of focusing on process, let's focus on people. Let's think about how do we encourage communication, transparency, and create this in a way so that we can get rapid feedback and be very flexible.
Okay, but how do you do that without it becoming chaos? I mean, if everybody's talking, if everybody's a chief, it's going to be chaos, right?
Sure. In Agile, Agile is really culture, and it's that idea of these concepts and and trying to make work better. But the way in which it's implemented is through there's different techniques, different methodologies. The one that I'm probably most familiar with, as most people are, is called Scrum. And it's very disciplined. It's actually more disciplined than traditional project management in that you do these iterations called sprints in 2 or 3 week cycles. You do them with very small teams, and you take a backlog of items of different kinds of requirements called user stories, and you're able to go through those based on the priority that's set by a product owner, and go through those one by one and get them done. At the end of the sprint, you demo that or showcase it to the folks who are going to get feedback, the stakeholders and potentially even customers. And you get feedback on, do they like this? Do they not like this? What do they want changed? And so you fail fast, and you're able to correct your issues, and you're able to shift the work as well, so that the next sprint, you're able to make it even better and better. So it's always about continuous improvement.
Okay, so it's what it sounds like to me is, for lack of a better description, a fancy way of describing having a good, constant kind of feedback loop of the people you're dealing with, the project owner who is the person who's initiated the project, maybe a new product or a new initiative or something like that, right?
Right.
And the people who are developing it, and also representatives from the buyer or the consumer of the product, right? So you have this feedback
really
loop that you work with.
cross-functional, yep. And it tears down that traditional wall that was between the business and the technology teams and says, no. We need to be working together much more effectively, having much more frequent communication. And so that role of product owner or product manager is that one that really helps to prioritize it for the team. But the team has a say as well in terms of what's being developed, and really being able to highlight and get that feedback, having the direct discussion with their stakeholders.
Okay, now this is something that my understanding is was developed for the software world because they were developing software for applications and everything. And it's still pretty much software driven and tech company oriented kind of process, right?
It is. There's a few examples out there of companies that have taken it and applied it to other parts of their business. I work on some projects that do that as well. Actually, the cover of the Harvard Business Review is about Agile at scale and how organizations can use Agile in a much more flexible way through their organization. I actually use it in my own home. So we follow Scrum methodology in my own family to help us prioritize the things that we want to do, the goals that we have as a family, and we all kind of get to have a say in it and be very transparent about how that's going.
Okay, wait a second now. From my understanding, if I recall correctly,
right,
you have young children, right?
I have a 4 and a 7-year-old.
So a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old engaging in scrums for Agile methodology, managing the family.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I had seen a TED Talk by Bruce Feehrer about this concept, and so I said, well, I certainly know Agile. I think I could try this out. And so we're a family of sticky notes, and we have all these different ideas of things that are our backlog of things that we want to do. And so we stick them up, and our kids can write them, and we help our 4-year-old, of course, write out what he wants to do. And it might be things like, I want to go to Legoland this weekend, but it might be a home improvement project or something we need to budget for. Different activities that are important to us as a family, we put them in a backlog, and then every couple weeks, every 2 to 3 weeks, we actually go through and decide what's going to go in our focus for those couple weeks. At the end of it, we have our family meetings called a retrospective, just like it would be in sprints, and we talk about what's going well, what do we want to change, and what do we want to do differently going into the next iteration or sprint.
Now we'll dive into your issues and problems, maybe with the family too. But I want to talk about challenges, because this is not something that's easy to deploy. Even in a business, much less your family. Okay, we're going to talk about that in a minute. But my first question, and actually before we take a break here, what I want to do is ask you, how has it gone with the family?
Sure.
Has it gone okay? I mean, does it work?
It does, yeah. It's really great when you can kind of give control back to people. And I find that with customers, and I find that with my own family, when they're able to be the ones to advocate for an idea and be able to say, hey, we want to do this, and let's try this out, or let's think about things differently. Giving everyone a voice is very exciting, and so it changed the dynamic of our relationships, allowing us to really decide kind of what's going on at that time, and to shift too, because things change in your family. Priorities are different, especially as you're playing sports and you're doing so many activities, and families are so chaotic. it's nice to be able to have that time when we get back together and say, okay, what's really important to us.
That's interesting. And so you include the 4-year-old and the 7-year-old in giving that time and giving them that opportunity to essentially control the destiny and the outcome for the family.
For the most part, we try to have a democracy. Doesn't always work. Sometimes, we do have to have a captain of the ship,
Well,
but, we try
great.
our best.
Okay, so on that note, we'll take a very short break from our sponsor,
Similar
which
to
is,
the
of
kinds
course,
of tool-
me and Alpha Context, my company. And we're gonna
Love to
go on and find out more about Lauren and what she's doing here and how she's deploying Agile methodologies in her businesses and her family.
Sure. Thanks.
Robert J. Curtis is the founder and CEO of Alpha Quantix, a premier provider of employee analytics and metrics that helps CEOs and managers of middle market companies hire the best, manage the best, and be the best. Robert is a keynote speaker, presenter, moderator, and panel member who regularly appears at conferences, business events, and association meetings nationwide. His presentations provide powerful information that give CEOs and managers of middle market companies valuable insights to improve their hiring and engagement skills. If you'd like Robert to make a personal appearance, he can be contacted by visiting his show's website, bestcompanyshow.com, or by emailing Robert at info@bestcompanyshow.com.
And welcome back to this edition of Best Companies Show and Podcast. I'm your host, Robert J. Curtis. Be sure to check out our website at bestcompanyshow.com for information on my upcoming speaking engagements and events. You'll find lots of information there. You'll also find more information on our company, our sponsor, which is Alpha Quantix, focusing on analytics and metrics that drive performance within organizations. You can listen to this show and other shows at that website. You might be able to, hopefully Lauren will be able to post her show at least at her place, and I know that you're pretty good at getting the message out to your people. So yeah, hopefully your people will see and be able to hear this. Why don't we do this on that note? Tell us how we can reach you. How can your people find you, or people who are interested?
Sure. www.loyaltycraft.com is my website, and my email is lauren@loyaltycraft.com. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and I try to be active in our community here in Orange County and San Diego. I'll be at Startup Week San Diego at the end of this month, and looking forward to it.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's go on. Let's move on. I want to find out. Okay, and this is great because you introduced the family into this equation. Let's not talk about the family right now.
Sure.
I want to talk about your businesses, and we'll get back to the family because I think that Agile methodologies and employing it in organizations that aren't used to it probably leads to kind of issues and change of mentality, change of mindset. Tell me how that works.
Yeah, a couple things. One is certainly that a lot of large organizations are very siloed in their nature, and that focus of customer experience is handled by sales, or it's handled by customer service, and sometimes not thought of as an organizational-wide initiative. And Agile tries to break down those barriers and say, okay, we're going to have cross-functional teams working on different objectives we might have. And that's where the application of it can be really exciting. You can take different people from the business, form a small team. They say a team should never be able to eat more than 2 pizzas.
That's the Amazon 2-pizza rule. I've mentioned that before on the show, actually.
Right. So you're bringing together maybe 5 to 7 people or so to work on a particular set of challenges within their organization. And so they're bringing that different perspective. And I think that's really important, is that you have to be inclusive of different ideas and different ways of working. There's, aside from just having this core team, those roles of product owner that I mentioned before, that's really key. And it's a challenging role to play, where you're the one who decides the prioritization. You're the one who's got to get constant feedback from your end customers. But that role is really critical at driving the work and the kind of work that comes into the backlog. And then also recognizing that not everybody works the same way. I've spent many, many years working with technology teams, and I will say I have a very extroverted style about me, and so I had to learn that communication isn't always, leading with this trumpet, but also recognizing that creative work often happens through, through introversion, and that you need to allow people space to do that. And so having that diverse group means recognizing people's different styles, and that employees are only going to really be thrilled about working with you if you allow for that, you allow them that creative space to foster growth.
Mm-hmm. So which leads to an interesting question, and we talked about it earlier, we alluded to it, which was the idea of customer experience, or has its origins, a good customer experience has its origins in the employee experience, right? The employee engagement. So tell me about that. And tell me how you use Agile methodologies to either improve that or engage the employees to get those results that you're looking for on the customer experience side.
Yeah, I think that organizations need to figure out how do they get the customer voice right at the table every day. And that might be having panels be very active within the organization. It may be actually having employees go out to customer sites and do ride-alongs and be able to experience what a day in the life of a real customer is like. And I've seen fantastic organizations and folks like Amazon, they actually put every employee in their call center once a year. And I think that's fascinating. It gives you a chance to really, really think about what is it like to be in my customer's shoes. And those are the organizations I think that separate themselves, is that they're driving that culture, and they're getting their employees excited about what opportunities can they bring to that customer.
Is some of that the employee engagement we're talking about? Is some of that just adding diversity and adding perspective, and maybe not always the same routine, or is it more than that?
I think it is that and more. It's making sure you're representing your customer in some way, so it's getting their voice at the table. But it also comes from the experience that every one of your employees may be having with your product or with your service. They bring a perspective, and so I think it's important to, recognize that their voices and their perspective about the company's activities is so important.
And then their perspective and their communication with that employee, that person, is going to be different depending on who they are. Like you said, tech people or other creative people might be a little more introverted.
Right. And it's creating the space to allow for that feedback to come in, and finding those opportunities. That's why I like Agile, because you're going to have these small teams that can allow that to be fostered. But organizations that are top down and command and control don't, they miss that exciting opportunity to really hear from their own employees on what they could do differently. Okay, great. Now, successes in the field. Have you seen great results? Can you give me some examples, or at least one example maybe, of something that you thought was a really great success? Sure. This was way back when. One of my very first engagements was working with EMC, now owned by Dell, on their total customer experience program. And they were really trying, and it was one of the early adopters of Agile actually. They were trying to help customers out and who had storage devices all over the world, help them run better, help them have less experiences of data unavailability or data loss. And so I had the experience of running a technology team that sat in between the engineering department, the customer service folks, and really became very cross-functional in nature in terms of understanding, what are these devices, what could they be sending back to EMC in terms of data, and being able to report on that and help them, basically help their customer service reps deploy solutions much faster, and being able to build up a team that really, really saw what are those unique requirements and what's so important to these people in that kind of B2B2C relationship. It was really exciting to see my team kind of foster that spirit of innovation and be able to think of, well, what could we do? What could we build differently than what's out there today? And those folks, I'm still very, very proud to call them colleagues and friends, and they've done amazing things in their careers since then. It was a launch pad for me personally to understand that building product was really about listening, and to see that those team members kind of took the same approach in their careers and have done really, really well. We still have a reunion. They're from all over the world, particularly in Hyderabad, India. So whenever we go back to India, we have a great reunion.
Okay.
And it's awesome to see them.
That's wonderful to hear. Now, I have a real quick question for you. We always throw at the guest every week. We throw a hot seat question. And the hot seat question I'm going to because we talk too long. Okay, you and I talk too much, right? So we only have a few minutes here. So let's do a real quick hot seat question for you. It's something that you might find interesting and near and dear to your heart because it has to do with a lot of this, integration, team building, communication, everything else, right? In the news lately, Nike. Nike has had all kinds of issues lately at their upper management and I guess throughout the organization with the sexual harassment claims and various other things going on.
Right.
It's been in the news that 11 of their senior management people have been asked to leave the company or left on various terms.
Right.
And now they're having to rebuild internally. It's interesting because not a lot of press coming out. There's some press.
No,
but it's a big thing.
I've talked to people who don't even know that that's a story, and it's kind of been hidden, which is shocking because it's really the first company you see where they have removed their entire executive team. I mean, people that the gentleman who's next in line, Trevor Edwards, next in line to be the CEO, gone.
Okay.
And so that's very, very different. And I mean, it's very commonplace that you see sexual harassment issues coming out in the Me Too movement. This is that first big company that, in a company that's so, passionate about empowering women to have this happen, shows that what was happening internally was not at all in line with their company values. So.
Okay, so now in 60 seconds, I know you can't do this, but we only have about 60 seconds left. Can you tell me briefly, how would you approach this problem of the executive management team leaving, of dealing with sexual harassment issues that wasn't communicated to higher levels? How would you deal with that?
Right.
And is there something from Agile methodologies, for example, or from your customer experience, customer engagement, or employee engagement processes that you could apply to this?
Sure. Well, I certainly think it was too late, and the voices were coming through, and they were ignored. And so this survey that these women crafted and put on Mark Parker's desk was essential. Now it's about rebuilding and putting people in those leadership positions that will support the culture that they want to be going forward. So building that right inherent in the culture. You could certainly have agile teams that are encouraging that communication and constant feedback and start to rebuild it at this point.
Okay, great. Well, wonderful suggestion. I hope that they succeed. I'm sure they will.
too.
Actually, they've been a great organization over the years.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you, Lauren, so much
Thanks.
for being guest here. You have so much information. I wish we had a lot more time to talk about it all and share it.
Certainly. Thanks, Robert.
Can you share with us one last time how people can reach you and find out about you?
Absolutely. LoyaltyCraft.com. Also on LinkedIn, just look for Lauren Feehrer. And Lauren@LoyaltyCraft.com is my email. Thank you.
I'd like to thank our engineer, Paul Roberts. And
spell it out. So somebody wanted to tweet her name.
Okay,
Feehrer is tricky. Feehrer.
Okay, there you go. Okay,
Thank you.
Paul. I wanted to thank our engineer, Paul Roberts, along with producer Roland Canamar. These two gentlemen are very crucial and essential at the program and make it a success it is. If you'd like to connect with me through social media, I'd love to connect with you. I'm on LinkedIn, of course, at Robert J. Curtis. Don't forget the middle initial J. It's very important to find me and distinguish me from other people. And then once we get connected on LinkedIn, we can move from there. Until our next show, I hope your hiring and management decisions will lead you to be one of the best companies, and we'll see you soon.
You've been listening to The Best Company Show, Southern California's business podcast, focusing on topics of interest to CEOs and managers of middle market companies, with your host, Robert J. Curtis.
Live from